As hard as this seemed like it might be this morning, listening to these young people sing that song, what we have to do suddenly became pretty easy. And then the other thing that is helpful is that this setup right here that Scott and I are sitting at, it's kind of become home. A lot of Scott, we didn't do a lot of rehearsing this week. Scott's shaking like we didn't do any. We didn't do any.
No clue.
None. But that's because over the last year and a half, we've spent a lot of meals sitting at a table like this, just two guys talking about life. A lot of those meals, I've got to tell you, Scott's sitting with a little plate of broccoli and beets, and I've got cheeseburgers and fries. And
I actually thought I'd feel much more comfortable if you had beets up next time. Maybe we'll
lead pastor beets for the next one.
So.
But where's that clock that Joel pointed out that we have to kind of be mindful of? What time was that again? 10? Yeah, okay. Because we can get carried away. There's been many lunches where Scott said, "You're about to get me in trouble." I say, okay, let's. About 10 years ago or so, my wife and I, we just moved to Hanover County, I guess 8 or 9 years ago. But prior to that, we lived on the beautiful coast of North Carolina. And it was, 10, 12 years ago, I was sitting in Cape Cartwright Baptist Church. I love the pastor there. He reminds me probably why we find our home here today. Reminded me a lot of our pastor Chad, just a good godly man, but more than that, just full of heart for people and for the church. So I really came to lean on every word this guy said. And, a lot of Sundays, like Pastor Chad, from time to time, he'd get on a roll, and you get drawn into this sort of direction he was going, and you were sitting there knowing something big is coming. He's going to say something that's just going to rock my world. And Pastor Kevin, this particular Sunday, he did. He said something that rocked my world. And what he said was, and he was pretty fired up that day about our obligation to get out there and reach people for Christ, to touch people for Christ, to be servants. And he said, and I don't know how he got here, but the words, and I'm not paraphrasing much because it has stuck with me. He said, if you all were really serious, if you're really serious about reaching people for Christ, you would all go home today and get on your knees and pray for hardship and tragedy to come into your lives. Now I'm going to tell you, I looked around to see if anybody else was thinking what I was thinking, that somehow I had gone from a church to sitting in the middle of some cult or something, because that didn't sound right. And I'm going to tell you, I didn't go home that day and say that prayer. But in the years since then, I've come to understand a little bit more what he meant, what he was saying that day. And I've got to tell you, in the past year and a half, that message has come to hit me upside the head on an awful lot of days because of my friend here. So it leads me to, January 13th, 2014, I was sitting in the Ashland Library, piddling around with work, likely surfing the internet like I do sometimes when I'm piddling around with work, but really just taking life for granted. And I get a text message from my wife, Katie, and it's a simple message. It says, "Do you know Scott Menzies?" And I got to tell you, at that time, that was really the basic answer was yes, I know Scott Menzies. Scott and I had worked together on some projects in the community, particular grant that targeted eliminating alcohol-related crashes in our county. Scott and I had worked on that together for a few years, but never at the point where I would say, hey, we're best friends. I would call him that today, my best friend. And so I had to tell my wife that, yeah, I know Scott. Why? She said, well, I just heard that his wife was hit and killed while they were running here in Hanover County. Now, I didn't know, Scott and I knew each other, but I didn't know, I had never met his wife. And so when I heard that, I've got to tell you, I wasn't overwhelmed with this sadness we kind of get when you lose somebody close to you. That's not what hit me right then and there. But I'm going to tell you that something did come over me, and I didn't know that day really what it was, and I'm probably still figuring it out as we sit here today. I didn't know exactly what that was, but it was God tapping me on the shoulder. And I think he was saying, you better open up your eyes because I'm getting ready to do some things that you aren't going to believe. And so things sort of unfolded from there, but I'm going to turn it over to, that was my January 13, 2014. That's where I was. I would tell you, I would give anything that I could still say, I don't know Scott Menzies very well. Because that would mean we wouldn't be talking about a lot of the things that we're talking about today. But I got to tell you something else. It's good news for all of you. God rarely comes to me. I don't know if he ever has to say, I got a plan, Keith. What do you think? And so I'm going to let, my January 13, 2014 was different than my friends here. So I'm going to let him talk about that morning in his life.
Well, I've told this story so many times, and it sort of is numbing now. So I don't mean to sound, if it comes across sort of callous. It's just I can't get away from what happened that day. So I say it all the time. So that morning, that was a Monday morning. It started off. Meg and I ran on my days off. We had running dates. We'd run every day I was off. And so I had worked so this was a Monday. I'd worked that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 12-hour shifts, so I was exhausted that Monday. But we were going to go for a running date. She had planned. She had put food in the crock pot for that evening. And so we have 3 children. And that in 2014, that day, they were, I don't know how old they were, Ma. Yeah, they were like 8. I can't remember. I'm just learning their birthdays, and they're close size, by the way. So I was a great father. 5, 7, and 9. Got it. So my oldest 2 are boys. My youngest, Katie Sky, she was 5. She's 6 now. So anyway, we got them ready for school. They usually catch the bus at 7:20. Meg and I dressed in our running clothes like we had done every day I'm off. We're going to go out for about 11-mile training run. She was training for Boston. I was not. She was much faster than I was. So this run, this particular day, all of our runs were much slower for her, much faster for me. She would talk the entire time. I would not. And she would ask me on most of those runs, like, are you listening to me? And I would, through my trying to breathe, running, yes, I am listening to you. Well, you're not saying anything. Well, I'm trying to breathe. So anyway, it was a conversational pace for her, but it was silly fast for me. So we had gotten everybody ready and gotten the kids ready, and we're walking out to the bus stop, which is right at the end of our driveway at 7:20. And we were standing down there. I was stretching. We were messing with the kids. I was smacking them around and waiting for the bus. And Meg got a text or an email on her phone saying that the bus was having some mechanical problems. It was going to be 30 minutes late, which we'll maybe touch on that later, how that kind of that 30-minute delay there for the bus changed a lot of things in my life. So we went back in the house, played around for a little bit, and walked back out to the bus stop about 7:50. I stretched. They caught the bus. Meg and I headed out for a run. We got a mile in, of which she was just still chatting it up. We were running on the facing traffic the way we were supposed to, and we were running off the road just on the shoulder, and we got exactly a mile in. And usually, we would run tandem until cars would come. It's just so we'd run right next to each other so we could talk, or she could talk to me. And we usually decide early on who's going to tuck behind the other when a car comes, just the way runners usually do. And I had a reflective vest on, and she didn't that day, so she decided that you go behind me because I'm more visible. And so we got about a mile in. There was a group of cars coming, and she tucked behind me. And I'm a little bit taller than she was, so she couldn't see the cars coming. She just knew they were coming. I saw a car running off the side of the road towards us and got down in the ditch and sort of rode the ditch like a train on a train track. And I knew that I couldn't get out of the way, and it happened really, really quick, obviously. So I ran to the middle of the road towards the double yellow line, and I yelled for Meg, and she didn't have the visibility I did because she was right behind me. And so she ran towards the ditch, which is where the car was. I got to the double yellow line. I turned and looked towards her, and she was there for just a second, and then she was gone. And the car passed, and debris passed, and then I could see her laying there on the side of the road, in the ditch. And I ran to her. She was, she was struggling to breathe and live, and I remember just collapsing, and there was nothing I could do for her. And so I remember saying clear as I could, that I remember pleading for God not to take her, and that I needed her, and I could not do life without her, knowing that I thoroughly believed that she was not going to survive. And my brother-in-law is here too. We're both police officers in Ashland, and we've seen people die, and we've seen people fight for their life, and that's what she was doing. And I knew that she was not going to make it because I'd seen that before. My brother-in-law actually showed up. He came there. The news traveled really fast, and we were 4 miles away from Ashland. So when it all got kind of called in to the dispatch, they were there really quick. I mean, they were there before Meg was loaded into the ambulance. And I remember, Adam probably remembers, I remember being, they were holding me up in the middle of the road while the rescue personnel were working on her. I remember saying that I'll never run again, that I would never run. I'll never run again. And so we left the house at 7:50, and Meg was hit, just after 8:00. They put her in the back of an ambulance. We met her at MCV. They walked on her, and at 9:43, she was declared dead. Less than 2 hours of my life, less than 2 hours, everything changed. I remember my father handed me Meg's wedding ring, and he took that off of her hand. And I remember getting into the car. The chief drove us home. And I remember thinking, I don't know how I'm going to tell my children who were at school. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do any of this. Life prepares. And Adam and I, we go through a lot of training, a lot of training experience, and there's a lot of life. We use a lot of our life experiences in training at work. And I remember thinking on the way home that I received no training for this. I don't know how to do this. I don't have any experience. So we got home, and my father-in-law, who's here, and my dad went and picked up my children at school, which was not normal. But by this time, everyone was at our house. I mean, the guys from work, my family. It appeared to my children when they pulled in that it was a huge party. And they didn't know why Pop and Granddad picked them up. Didn't really matter. They were excited to be out of school and excited that they got picked up. And they came into the house, I remember. And I still can't sit where I told them. But I remember telling them that Mom and I went out for a run, and she got hit and killed by a car. And they were shocked. But my middle son then asked me, "Can we go outside and play now, Daddy?" And I remember thinking, yeah, that was the beginning. That's when things changed.
And so as, you know, as you hear more about the details that go beyond, do you know Scott Menzies? That suddenly became about a dad, myself, with a wife, with 2 young kids, Scott's kids' ages, and you can start to imagine your own self in these situations. And you can start to imagine how unthinkably hard some of the things that Scott would have to go through would be. And understanding those things really set the stage for me just being in awe of this guy in the months to come. And through him in awe of God. You know, it wasn't it was, you know, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but in the week after Meg was killed, there were 100,000 runners that got together on a Saturday and ran in Meg's name. 100,000. You know, that's about the size of Hanover County. And they came from all over this country and all over this world. And so you started to get the sense of how powerful this was touching people. And I wasn't any different than that. I went out and ran that Saturday, and I assure you, that is not how I spent my Saturdays. You talk about the power of this story. But, you know, I was out running, and just a lot of things started coming to me. And when a lot of things come to me, I write. I mean, that's my deal. A lot of us sing. A lot of us do different things. I write. And so I sat down and just wrote a lot of my thoughts that were going through my head that came to me when I was out there running that day. And so then I shared them out there. You know, social media, you can put things out there and then people read them. And you know, that next week, I happened to be home. I don't know what I was doing. I was getting ready for something. And so Katie hollers back to me. She said, "Keith, Scott Menzies is at the door." I was like, "What?" And so I went out, and Scott came in. And he said, "I just want to thank you." He said, I want to thank you for being there. I want to thank you for the things you wrote about Meg. I just want to thank you. And I was like, and coincidentally, you know, where I write these things is on a blog I call A Life of Gratitude. And I was standing there seeing gratitude like I had never seen it. All of the things that Scott had to be dealing with, that he was taking the time out of his life to stand in my doorway and say thank you. That's when I really started to know this was going to be more than I know Scott Menzies. You know, this was a friend. And so it wasn't much longer than that. We started, you know, talking a little bit more, and we were standing behind the Ashland Police Department one day, and he gets to talking sort of life without Meg. And in that conversation, you know, he said something to me that day again as a dad. He said, "You know, this used to be all that was important to me. All I ever wanted to be was a good cop." He said, "Today, all I want to be remembered as is a good dad." And so then, you know, he talked to me a little bit about where that came from, and I'm going to turn that over to him to let him tell you all where some of that comes from.
Well, I told Keith that day that I was pretty ashamed at the person, the father that I was before Meg. Not that I was a horrible father, but that I worked a lot. I took a lot of the time for granted, like most of us do. Still, and I do that still now, and I'm working on it. And I'm not the father that I need to be now. I have a lot of help. My father-in-law, my mother-in-law, my parents, they're helping me. But I'm still not there. I got a long road ahead. And I told Keith that day, and I may have shared it a few times actually with Keith, but I remember, I worked a lot so to make a stay home. We as cops, we don't make a lot of money, so we work a lot of overtime to make ends meet, and that's what I did. Meg stayed at home with the children. She had a couple part-time jobs, but they were kind of hit or miss, and I would work when I could, and she would constantly send me emails and texts thanking me for working, and by doing that, it almost reassured me that what I was doing was the right thing, and I think that I was, but I can't get the time back now, and I value that time. Time was money to me. Time wasn't memories. Time was money. So we were in the driveway one Sunday, or it had to be Sunday morning. So I got to be honest too. There's some Sundays, Pastor, that I don't want to get up and come to church. So that I was having one of those mornings where I just thought I could sleep better. It would make me a better father. Maybe I didn't need to go to church that day. So I tried that. It didn't go over well. I got up. I was frustrated. I was pushing every one of Meg's buttons intentionally, and it was working. And it was frustrating. We got in the car, packed the kids up. We got in the car. We're heading to church, and we hadn't made it out of the driveway yet. And she said, and we were talking, and she said to me, "Scott, do you have any idea why we're here?" And so I once again pushed more buttons. I said, "Yeah, I'm here. I'm driving to church. We got the kids packed. You're talking to me. I'm trying not to talk to you." And she said, she shut me down right there, and she said, "No." She said, "We are here to serve God. That is the only reason we're here." And I tried to crush her momentum there, but I don't even remember what I said, but it didn't go over well. So I will never forget that. And I think about it all the time now. I think about that day that sort of just haunts me, but it gets me going in the mornings. And I say that I know we're jumping all over the place, but I got to say that Meg had always told me that, there were days that when I didn't go to church that my children were seeing that, and I was failing them. I was failing as a spiritual leader in the house, and there are days I still fail at doing that. I'm trying harder. I have an unfair advantage sometimes now, and that is because I knew what I was then, and I've learned from Meg now. I've learned from Meg more now in death than I did when she was here, when she was alive, and I'm ashamed of that. I've become a better listener, maybe a better father some days, because she's not here. I'm ashamed of it, and she's not here to see that. And so I say to men and fathers here, and it can go in one ear out the other, and I know I've been there, and I've heard it before, but I'm telling you, if you are not leading your children, your family, you are failing them. And that's my unfair advantage now. I cannot get that back. I can't get the time back.
I was driving in today. A friend of ours who lives in Ohio has become a close friend just through this incident and online. He sent a quick message to tell us he was thinking of us, and we kind of got talking back and forth. And because of these stories that Scott has told me about how Meg was always challenging him about his faith and trying to raise him to a different level in his faith, we kind of talked back and forth and tried to picture what Meg's face would look like today as she's looking down, seeing kind of you taking on this role today. I told him mouth wide open. I don't know what you would say.
Yeah, I think the last place she thought I would be in a church, talking to people about God and her faith. That would be, she would say, not Scott Menzies, not that guy.
Yeah. One of the conversation Scott and I have had lately a lot is, and I started off with the Old Testament. I didn't keep up very well. But because of my friend here, I got sucked in to the book of Job. And I mean, I read Job, and then I got to reading and watching every sermon I could find on Job. And it's because of my friend here. And I don't know how many of you, Job's a pretty short book, but I'm telling you, if you get into Job, I can attest, you can spend months on Job. But so to try to tell you my thoughts in a couple of minutes here is a bit of a challenge. But God held Job up as this just upright man. This guy, he was good as gold in God's eye. Well, then, Satan came into that and said, I'm not real sure what Job's motives are here, God. I don't think, I think Job's into this God thing just to see what he can get from you. And so, God assured him that wasn't the case and kind of gave Satan just a little free rein to challenge on that. And so pretty soon Job was without everything he owned, really. His children, family, other than his wife. And even after Job lost all of that, he said, God, you're still my man. All right, I'm still with you. Well, Satan said, yeah, this is a bit too much. So Satan said, well, any man, he'll do anything to save his life. Why don't you challenge him with his life? And so then Job came down with all these horrible boils and sores and the whole deal. And then, at this point, even Job's starting to wonder, Lord, what has happened? He didn't sin, but he just starts to wonder what is going on here. And then Job's got these three wonderful friends that try to convince him that, the whole reason you're going through this, Job, is because, you've done something awfully wrong. These friends even, they're sitting looking, seeing this guy is a good guy, and he's going through this. Even they're trying to figure out, what is God up to in this? So the only thing they can come up with is, Job, you're a real screw-up. And so God's just, coming down on you pretty hard. And it didn't help then that his wife, she starts to feel some of the pressure of this, and the wife even ends up saying, Job, would you just go ahead and curse God and die? That'll help us move this whole thing along. And so Job is going through this, just this horrible tragedy, and he's going through this whole trying to figure out where is God in this thing, and even gets to the point where he's saying, boy, why did you ever let me live? Why didn't I just die? But then God ends up coming down, and I guess he gets tired of watching us be foolish at some point and argue about some things. So he came down and had this talk with Job that basically said, Job, you don't have a clue. You're kind of looking at the world through the lens of your plans. It goes back to, what I talked about earlier. God usually doesn't come to me to see what I think about his plans. And probably because I have no clue. Scott and I were talking about this the other day. Scott does a lot of, logistics work with Ashlyn. I say that it's sort of an inside joke, and he's not laughing right now. But our idea sometimes, if you're a logistics guy and if you're a me sort of guy, our idea of planning is you write things down, next step, this step, and we really start to think about planning in just really this very limiting box. And I just don't think God plans inside a box like that. So, he really just said to Job, you have no clue what all is behind the things that I've created and what I've done. And so, I'm just going to, I know that's had to weigh on you, or I'm just going to ask how you have entertained. I guess we come to tragedies like that, and on one end we may say, things just happen, and then God comes in and whirlwind fixes it, or maybe God plans it all. I don't even know how you look at those things now.
I don't know. I think the human part of us wants to say, okay, well, if God is truly in control, then he took Meg's life, and it was a scale, and he said, okay, I can take Meg's life, and I can affect 18,000 people, so it's worth it. I've thought about that. I don't. That's me. That's my mind. That's my box. My thought process. Okay, well, there's got to be a reason. So that's the reason. So he took her life to affect others. I don't know if that's true. I early on, I shook my fist at God. I was angry, very angry. I didn't understand. I've come to understand that I'm never going to understand. And so that's better for me to I feel better realizing that. But I thought that I don't, how could you allow the bus to have a mechanical problem and put us 30 minutes behind and put us in that path? Why? Okay, so maybe at times I feel like, okay, maybe he's punishing me for not being a better father. He's teaching me a lesson. But why would he do that to my family, to her father, to her mother? Why would he do that to my children? And that doesn't make any sense to me. I will say that, we're going to talk, we're just going to touch on maybe forgiveness, and I'm struggling with that. It's a battle. I feel like I'm on this journey now, and that's important to mention too. Keith and I talked about, like, okay, so there's a plan. There's a plan for each of us, and so in my mind, my plan would be, it was before January, Meg and I would grow old together. We'd watch our kids have kids. We'd have grandkids. We'd retire, and maybe go to Disney World a bunch of times. And I think Meg would say the same thing. Like, we would run a bunch, we'd have a good life, and we'd watch our kids. We'd do our best to raise them, and we'd watch them grow and watch their kids grow. And that was our journey. That was the journey I thought I was on. We were on. And that day, January 13th, Meg's journey ended. But she got to where she was supposed to be. And so I think for a lot of us, that time, it's time. And that's the only thing. That's the only thing I want to do now. That's what she would say to me now, is that, I don't have to understand why this happened. We don't have to understand that. But what she would say is that we need to use every bit of this tragedy to bring people closer to God. That's the journey that we should be on now. And look, I'm telling you, there are days that I get to work, and Adam can tell you, some of these guys would say, the last place Scott was on Sunday was in church because that guy's not acting right. So I say that because none of us are perfect, but we're on this journey. And we can't take this time for granted because we don't know when it's going to end. But I know where I want to be when it ends, and that's where Meg is now. And that's one of those things that, you feel bad. Life crashes all the time. We were going to talk. We were going to put a picture up here, that the one that kind of floated around of us when we ran Kentucky, and it was just, we had a great time. And it was a happy look at these sort of Christians that are having such a good time. And that's not how life is. Yeah. We put on a good, as Christians, we put on a good face, like that everything is okay. We Christian, we believe, and we point to God and we say, yeah, everything's good. But life is not good sometimes. And those pictures can be deceiving, because that's not how life is. But I know He's there. I know He never turns His back on us. And I struggle every day, as most of us do. We all have our struggles. But we just got to keep looking up.
Yeah. And that's been, that has been such a powerful part of this relationship that has drawn me to Scott, and then more importantly has drawn me to God. Scott's a straight shooter. I love the guy. You don't ever have to sit and wonder, what are you thinking? What are you going through today? He'll tell you. And it has been helpful to me, because we do. And I'm here to tell you, we have to check ourselves, because sometimes we do present that the answer to everything, just be a Christian. All right, once you're a Christian, then everything, it all gets easy. And the real danger in that, is that when something like this happens, and I'm telling you, if you get to know the Menzies and the Cross families, like I've had the opportunity to do, man, they are wonderful people. They are just such good people. And so if you even tried to factor the word deserving into this plan, it is a whacked out plan. And so, if we as Christians try to paint this picture that, man, just come on over here. Jesus is here. You're having all sorts of trouble. Come on over. Let me smooth things out for you. Well, then all of a sudden, you hear this story. And then people are going to say, well, where was God then? And we really start to chase people away. I love this guy. He has drawn me closer to God because every day he says, life is stinking hard. You can't even imagine how hard it is now. But guess what? I am here today because I am leaning on God. He hadn't come down and swooped and made it all better. Wasn't that day happened, and I said, oh, I'm a believer in God. And so God's going to say, sorry, Scott, but, that just had to be. But here, I'm here. I'm going to make it all better. That's not what he says. I mean, I look in the Bible. It doesn't say that anywhere. Maybe Pastor Chad or Joel, somebody correct me later. I don't see it. What he says is, Jesus said, one of the first hints ought to be, Jesus said, follow me and then pick up your cross. And we all know what the cross comes to symbolize. So that ought to be our first hint. This isn't going to be an easy walk. So this guy here has just touched my life by being open to the battle that he's in. But more importantly, saying there is only one place I can turn with this battle. And, that came from one place. That's this person that we're really talking about today, Meg Cross Menzies, and her faith. This is rooted in that. I do want to, we're just going to touch on it because, we're all local here. Well, a lot of us are local. And we've all heard. The piece Scott left out is, and we're not here to beat anybody up today, but it is an element of the story that Meg was hit by a driver who made a poor choice. All right? And so that does factor in when you have to sit. This wasn't a wife who just died. There was a choice that somebody else made that factored into this. In addition to asking, what would have happened if the school bus had been on time? You have to ask also, what if somebody had made a different choice? And, we've had this conversation, part of an admitted struggle, but, what's God's role been in that internal conversation you have with yourself?
It's easy to in this situation to blame someone. And, I did. I did that. But I could not, I couldn't do it. I couldn't let my thoughts be consumed with anger or rage or, I did feel that during that time that was causing a problem with my relationship with God. We get hung up, I think, a lot of times on forgiveness and the lack of being able to show compassion to someone in this situation, I think, because it's about me and another person. It's about me and what you did to me and my family. And look, I'm talking about myself. I'm not talking about anyone else. I'm just saying that I can't live with that anger because it causes a problem with my relationship with God. So I don't know where other people are, and there are other people in situations like this, and I don't know if it's the right thing to do or not. I just know that if unforgiveness causes a problem with my relationship with God, then I got to figure something out. So the man that hit and killed Meg, I have a lot of compassion for him and for his family, because we went to court, and you guys read the media and the story, and so everybody knows what happened. But we didn't walk out of court thinking, well, everything's good now. We won. No, because there are no winners in this situation. There are none. But the inability to show compassion or the inability to forgive is a battle every day. But I can't let, and this is for my children too. A lot of this, and we didn't touch on this a lot, but I don't want 10 years to go by and my children look back and say, we saw anger every day from our father, or we saw him crash, and there are days that they see me crash and they see my family crash. It's unavoidable. But I care very much about how they see that, how we handle this situation. It's very important. It's important for me, but it's important for them. And so I want them to see compassion and love for him and for his family. And that's tough to do. It's a battle. It's tough to do.
Yeah. And this has been an ongoing conversation with Scott and I, and probably he has helped me with that one, because too many times, again, we go back to being a Christian and just being a human. Too many times we talk about forgiveness, we picture it as this, high five and the other guy, we're all cool, everything's good now, and so that's looking at it from our own personal relationships, and that is forgetting that all of our relationships are based on the relationship with God. And so Scott has really helped me get in working through this thing. It didn't, because I never have. I have never, ever said, Scott, do you forgive this man? Scott, do you think you will forgive this man? And I think just through these conversations, we've worked to the point it's really about whatever that emotion is, managing it in a way that keeps my relationship with God healthy and strong and growing, and in a way that, because here's what I know, and I don't know where Scott stands today. He talked about it a little bit, but I know one thing: he's sitting up here today in the midst of everything he's going through, proclaiming God's goodness. And that says a lot about how he's dealing with compassion. Boy, I hate to. Yeah, we got a few minutes, so I got to move to this piece. And boy, it's probably my least favorite part about this whole story. So I wasn't a runner. I was not a runner. Meg was a runner, and lots of folks will talk about what a great runner Meg was. So last November, was kind of the first big gathering of this Meg's Miles group. It's on Facebook, and Meg's Milers, Meggers. It's got a lot of wonderful names, but they're all a bunch of crazy runners for the most part. I got in there just because a lot of people said some real encouraging things. Well, then last November, a lot of these crazy runners decided they're going to run the Richmond Marathon. And so then one day I went on there, and I just kept hearing this thing, in my head, do it, Keith, do it, Keith. And it was something far worse than the devil that was saying it, because I am not a runner. And so I signed up to run the Richmond Half Marathon. And, I'll just fast forward to how that went. It wasn't long after that I signed up to run the Bluegrass Half Marathon through some of, I don't know what mountains really look like, but they are in Kentucky, because we had to run through them. And, Scott and I went, and there were about 40 Meg's Milers that came from all around the country, including Alaska. I mean, they came to, Meg, that's Meg's draw. It is her. She draws people to this crazy running thing, and she drew us to Kentucky. I was near the back of the pack in Kentucky. That's where I always am, in the back of the pack when it comes to running. And one of the fellows our friend that I referred to earlier was running with Scott up front. Well, then he ended up staying behind and waited for me. And when I caught up to him, he said, Scott's been running. I've ran with Scott for 9 miles. And he said, the whole 9 miles, he keeps saying, Keith's back there somewhere cussing me. And so Tracy looked at me, waiting for my Christian response, and I said, Scott's stinking right. It was a horrible experience, but
It wasn't horrible.
it was horrible.
It was 32 hills.
Hills, yeah.
That wasn't.
Go ahead and give that Facebook spiel.
Could have been
Gently
33.
rolling hills, yeah.
It wasn't horrible.
Made me afraid of gentle and rolling the rest of my life. Well, actually, at the end of that, we were riding back. I got to tell it. Yeah. So we're in the car riding. I'm feeling awful. I'm feeling like somebody just ran 13 gentle rolling. So I said to him, Scott, I don't mean to be insensitive at all. So please don't take it as insensitive. But why couldn't Meg's passion have been eating cheeseburgers? I said it. But we were, we're in Lexington, Kentucky, and this is out in the middle of nowhere. And on mile 9 of this course, we came up. And this had all been planned ahead of time, but they had reconstructed the Meg's Memorial that is out in Hanover at mile 9, out in the middle of nowhere. And then there was this picture of, the famous Meg's smile. And, I'd seen it the day before. We went out and saw where they were kind of putting this thing up. And I'm going to tell you that mile 8 of that, it wasn't mile 9 after seeing it, it was mile 8. Running that mile leading up, knowing what I was going to see. I mean, if you looked out there, you're in the middle of nowhere. And I'm just asking, God, how is this? This seemingly simple girl from Hanover County, Virginia, is out here in the middle of Lexington, Kentucky. 40 people from all over the country. Here with this guy got to stand at the pre-race dinner. Well, we won't even go into that story. But he got to stand at the pre-race dinner and deliver this awesome message. And, in his words, I'm going to steal them. He said, if you all look around here and see this, and you're going to run up on mile 9 tomorrow and see what you're going to see. If you can explain that any way other than God, I don't know how. And that's kind of what, sort of the grand culmination of all this has been. So I don't know if you want to add anything onto that piece, unless you can make an announcement. We are going to move to cheeseburger passions.
I love cheeseburgers, but no, I don't think that's going to go over well. That's exactly what I mean. If someone can explain this without acknowledging that God is working right now in the midst of all this, I don't understand how. So,
I want to close by reading something to you, and it's from the Message, and it's James 5, 7 through 11. Meanwhile, friends, wait patiently for the master's arrival. You see, farmers do this all the time, waiting for their valuable crops to mature, patiently letting the rain do its slow but sure work. Be patient like that. Stay steady and strong. The master could arrive at any time. Friends, don't complain about each other. A far greater complaint could be lodged against you, and you know it. The judge is standing just around the corner. Take the old prophets as your mentors. They put up with anything, went through everything, and never once quit. All the time honoring God. You've heard, of course, of Job's staying power, and you know how God brought it all together for him at the end. That's because God cares. Cares right down to the last detail. This guy has demonstrated that to me for the last year and a half, that God cares right down to the last detail. I hope if you'll take anything away today, really, that it's life is about staying. If we get wrapped up in our plans, life becomes about finding the easy route. Our plans, they don't work. God's plan is about staying. And I thank you, my friend, for being here today. I love what you've done. And so, just thanks, buddy.